Chapter 13 Sticky Notes. There's not a whole lot in Chapter 13 that you have to know, so this will be a pretty short video. The first thing you have to know is the definition of urban. So urban means having a concentrated amount of people, more than 2,500 is the definition of urban. So rural is an area that has less than 2,500 people. It can even be a city that is less than 2,500 people. So we have little bitty towns across the United States, and a lot of them have less than this amount, and so they would be considered a rural area. So as we move from rural to urban, we have a decline in birth rates. The United Nations estimates that almost all of our next population growth will be urban because, now we're talking about not so much the United States but other countries, because most of the population increases in the world will occur outside of the U.S. The U.S. actually has slightly lower than replacement fertility, and we grow only because of immigration. But in other parts of the world, they're growing exponentially. We learned about this in Chapter 8. And so that growth is going to take place in the cities because there isn't enough jobs or land for people left in rural areas to support themselves. And then we live in the suburbs. So suburban means the outskirts of a city center. So that is us in Santa Clarita. Our main city center is Los Angeles. We have other city centers too, like Pasadena or West LA or Glendale or places like that. But the majority of our jobs are not in our city, so we are suburban. On page 338, we have some reasons people move to cities. So they're pulled to cities by jobs and healthcare and good education. So schools are often better in cities, not always, but often. And then people are also pushed to cities. So wars, famine, and environmental degradation can make where you're living unsustainable. So people move to cities because they can no longer survive in the rural areas. In the United States, our population is moving from the north and east to the west and south. So we are Western United States. We are growing exponentially out here, not just California, but places like Nevada, Idaho, Arizona, and then also to the south, Texas, North Carolina, Florida. People want to move in those states better, primarily for the weather. And so we have cities, older cities in the north and east, like Detroit, Milwaukee, places that have declining populations. So let's talk about suburbia, where we live. There are reasons why people move to the suburbs and add to sprawl. This is page 339. So people will move to the suburbs when they have enough money to, so that's affluence. People move also because there's cheaper homes in the suburbs. So even though Santa Clarita real estate is astronomical, it's super high, it is more expensive closer to LA in nicer neighborhoods. So nicer neighborhoods closer to LA are more expensive. So people move to Santa Clarita for cheaper housing. Also, we have great schools here, less crime, less air pollution, not so much lately. We have a lot of bad air pollution now. People want a yard instead of an apartment. And then if there's cars that they have and roads that they can commute to work, then those are reasons why people will make the decision to move to the suburbs. Turn to page 340. So urban sprawl, so we call this urban sprawl, is when you move from city centers into the suburbs. It changes the population distribution from high density to low density. So for example, if you go down to downtown LA or K-Town, which is Koreatown, they have high-rise condominiums. So you could buy a condo there in a 20-story building. Nice, beautiful condominium. Or in downtown, you could buy a loft. Beautiful, nice, expensive housing, but it's high density. So a lot of people live in the same square kilometer. And then if you move out to Santa Clarita, then now you have low density where people have their own house, or they live in a townhome, or their apartment buildings are only 2 stories high instead of 20 stories high. So now we have low density per square kilometer. So starting on this page, you have problems with sprawl. So make sure you have take the time to read and learn these problems. Like transportation problems means that most of the time there isn't public transportation in sprawling areas. And then we have more pollution because people drive more. If you have to drive a car to work instead of taking the bus or the subway, you're going to have more pollution. Then you're going to have health problems as well. Too much driving can lead to obesity and stress and heart conditions compared with walking to the subway and walking up and down stairs, etc. And then land use is a problem because if people go from high density to low density up here, then all of this is habitat loss. Versus all these people could have lived in one single building 20 stories high, but instead here they're spread out. So now you have all that habitat that has been lost. Oh, and on this page, so we don't really have forests in Santa Clarita, but a lot of the United States is forested, and it is something you need to know about. So when forests are cut down to build homes, this happened a lot in North Carolina where I lived for about 4 years. So there's a few things that happen with the water cycle. So evaporation is going to decline. Transpiration is going to decline because there's less trees, and trees do transpiration. And groundwater recharge is going to decline. So we also call this infiltration. So filtering into the ground, infiltration or recharging your aquifers, it's the same concept. They're going to go down because there's less soil to capture that rainwater. You're going to cement it over, and asphalt and concrete will prevent that recharge. And your runoff, because of all of that hardscape, we call that the concrete and the asphalt and the bricks, the water's going to run off when it rains. All right, on page 343, know some definitions here. Know the definition of urban planning or city planning, and regional planning and zoning. The word municipal means having to do with a city. This word's used a lot in APES. It's just an academic vocabulary word. So zoning is when you take a piece of area and you decide what can be built there. And we have these plans in Santa Clarita. We have certain areas of the city and where you can build low density housing, high density housing, where you can build industrial. So we have industrial centers, so you can't do industrial everywhere. Commercial, so you can't open up a store in your garage because that is commercial. You have to be in the correct zone. Turn to page 345. So some of the things that we do to try and prevent the problems with urban sprawl into the suburbs is smart growth, which is creating walkable, bikeable neighborhoods. It's also known as new urbanism. So smart growth and new urbanism are very, very similar. In new urbanism, we try to build areas that have mass transit, mixed land use, walkable, beauty, and aesthetics and architectural design. So here's this kind of area up here in Boca Raton, Florida, but we have something similar in Santa Clarita. We have the area around the Valencia Town Center. So like where the Regal Cinemas are and across McBean, you have all of these condominiums that people can buy. There's apartments that people can rent. And below it are restaurants, movies. And then over on Town Center Drive are some places that people can work, like Princess Cruises and other office buildings. So we have mixed use. So this zoning says you can have businesses and housing and restaurants all in the same location. So people could walk or bike or just take a quick Uber to the places they need to go to. And they have stores as well. And they want to make them beautiful. So basically this is a throwback to the way cities were previously. But people moved out of these kinds of places back 100 years ago or so because they had more crime and they were getting dirty. So now, can we put the good things back where everything's here that you can walk to or bike to, but yet make it beautiful, safe? So that is what we try to do. They're trying to do that a lot in parts of Los Angeles, like revitalizing parts of downtown where they take these old buildings and turn them into beautiful lofts. And so people are moving back to downtown, people that have money and they want to be able to take the subway to work or bike to work instead of driving an hour and a half each way in a car from the suburbs. On page 346, you need to know what type of mass transit is the best for the environment in terms of energy consumption and cost. So the automobile costs the most in energy and also personal money. So it costs you more to have your own car and it uses the most energy. Then you're talking heavy rail, light rail, commuter rail. So commuter rail is like subways, and then light rail is kind of like streetcars, and heavy rail is actually our Metrolink is heavy rail because it's just the way it is. But not all. In a lot of cities, their trains are light rail. It just has to do with how the trains are constructed. And then in terms of cost too, you can understand that public transportation is a win-win for people. So one of the ways that we protect habitats in the middle of building the needs for people, because people need places to live, is the importance of building parks. And that is one of our goals in Santa Clarita is to make sure that we have parks for people. And so we, when land is sold to build new houses, the city makes sure that there is land set aside to build parks in all of the new developments. And then they keep expanding and making places like Central Park bigger and better and more useful for their people. On page 348, some other things that we can do to minimize the impact of cities is to build greenways, green belts. So greenways are strips of land that connect parks or neighborhoods, and they often run, I'm reading up here what it is, they run along rivers and streams or canals. And then green belts are corridors of parkland that can circle an entire urban area. Yes. So, and then also we build green buildings and LEED buildings. And so some buildings around town are LEED certified. I believe the Coles on Golden Valley is LEED certified. And we have green buildings that help preserve the environment as they are built and continue to operate. So you need to know 3 to 4 features of green building design. What are the things that we do to certify things as a green building? Things from solar panels to green roofs, which is where you plant like grass or herbs or things up here on the roof, which cools down the house. And recycled material, landscaping with native plants, energy efficient lighting, etc. So make sure that you can describe on an FRQ several of these things that go into green buildings. All right, so we are actually going to need a second video. So I'm going to pause this video and continue on with the second video.